How does one measure the weight of a stone if its builders never intended for it to touch the earth? Before us lies a single block of impossible architecture, the sole surviving relic of a lost reality where gravity was not a physical law, but merely a variable to be negotiated with sound. Let us break the seal on the containment unit and document what remains. The object resting on the reinforced isolation platform is, in its simplest description, a masonry block. It measures exactly 1 cubic meter and weighs an astonishing 4.2 metric tons. Spectrographic analysis confirms the material is a hyperdense, ferrous basalt, completely devoid of natural impurities, fault lines, or vesicular cavities. To the naked eye, it appears unremarkable, a silent exercise in brutalist geometry. However, when we adjust our macro lens to examine the planar surfaces, the sheer impossibility of its creation becomes starkly apparent. Observe the edges under the raking light of the studio. Note the complete absence of tool marks. There are no striations from copper saws, no microfractures from hammer impacts, and no thermal scarring from laser ablation. The surface is perfectly flush, polished to a sub-micron tolerance. When two of these blocks are placed together, as demonstrated in the archival holography retrieved from the primary excavation site, they form a seal so absolute that not even a single molecule of atmospheric gas can pass between them. There is no mortar, no binding resin, and no internal pegging system. They are held together purely by the vacuum created by their own perfect, uncompromising alignment. To understand the context of this unnatural geometry, we must look to its provenance. This block was extracted from a geological anomaly designated as the Echo-Ziggurat, situated deep within a fractured, hyper-arid canyon on a desolate, tidally locked world. The stratigraphy of the canyon walls reveals a history of immense, unnatural tectonic stress. The surrounding rock faces are not eroded by wind or water, they are shattered, flaked away in concentric, parabolic waves. The entire canyon was artificially terraformed to act as a colossal amplifier. At the epicenter of this canyon stood the ziggurat, a massive, stepped pyramid comprised of millions of these precisely identical basalt cubes. But how did a society, completely lacking real transport or industrial machinery, move stones weighing over 4 tons? We find the answer not on the surface of the block, but trapped within it. If we project a low-yield ether resonance beam through the basalt, our instruments detect a highly localized, structural anomaly, as seen in the thermographic scan on the secondary monitor. The atomic lattice at the stone has been permanently warped, forming internal ripple patterns. We are looking at a fossilized acoustic standing wave. The architects of the Echo-Ziggurat did not cut this stone from a quarry, they subjected the bedrock to a specific, hyper-focused auditory frequency that caused the basalt to neatly cleave along its molecular bonds. Furthermore, they did not drag these blocks. By modulating the local etheric field with sympathetic vibrations, they effectively negated the stone's mass. They sang these 4-ton blocks into the sky, floating them into position upon a cushion of weaponized sound. I find it staggering to contemplate the sheer auditory violence of their construction site. The air itself must have been a physical, bruising force, a deafening symphony of industrial levitation. The block before us is entirely cold to the touch, yet it feels as though it is still vibrating with the memory of its own impossible flight. Moving beyond the physical impossibility of a 4-ton block suspended on an auditory cushion, we must interrogate the cultural and operational doctrine of the minds that sang it into existence. In our reality, architecture is a battle against gravity, fought with brute force and static load-bearing calculations. For the builders of the Echo-Ziggurat, architecture was a symbol, and gravity was merely a frequency waiting to be cancelled. If you observe the high-resolution render on reference plate 4, adjusting for the temporal distortion inherent to the ether resonance, a secondary layer of data emerges from a seemingly blank basalt, invisible to the naked eye. The planar surface is scored with microscopic, looping geometric mandalas. These are not decorative carvings created by a chisel, they are cymatic patterns, physical representations of complex audio frequencies, permanently locked into the stone's atomic lattice by the very sound waves used to lift it. To demonstrate this within the containment field, we introduce a micro-layer of inert silica dust to the upper surface of the block. When we play back the exact etheric frequency captured from the internal atomic warp, the block does not merely vibrate. The dust instantly organizes itself, snapping violently into the exact same complex, hexagonal mandala hidden within the stone. The sheer mathematical perfection of the shape is chilling. It is a visual manifestation of absolute, tyrannical order. There is no room for variance or error in this frequency. It is a sonic imperative that forces solid matter into strict compliance. Our syntactical models initially struggled to process these cymatic geometries to written language. However, when we map these shapes to a three-dimensional acoustic grid, they translate directly into complex polyphonic chords. This civilization did not write their engineering manual with ink, they encoded their knowledge in frozen harmonics. The primary repeating motif, the hexagonal wave cluster currently displayed by the silica dust, translates roughly to the binding resonance, or more accurately within the theological context, the frequency of absolute cohesion. This reveals a terrifyingly precise industrial framework. The construction of the Echo-Ziggurat did not require armies of enslaved laborers hauling sleds over rolling logs. It required choirs, orchestras of specialized acoustic masons, wielding masts, perhaps biomechanical resonant chambers, would encircle the basalt quarries. By perfectly matching the natural resonant frequency of the bedrock, they could shear the stone without a single tool. By slightly modulating the pitch and introducing a localized etheric inverse wave, they engaged the anti-gravitational lift. I find it deeply troubling to consider the biological toll this labor must have exacted. To generate and direct frequencies capable of nullifying 4 metric tons of mass would require an acoustic environment that would instantly liquefy standard human auditory organs and violently rupture internal vasculature. The architects of this society must have been profoundly deaf by evolutionary standards, or heavily biologically altered to perceive sound not as hearing, but as a full-body, high-pressure tactile experience. But the Echo-Ziggurat was not merely a feat of civil engineering, it was the epicenter of a planetary-scale theology. When we fully model the architectural topology of the stepped pyramid within our simulation mainframes, its true purpose is laid bare. It is a massive, solid-state amplifier. The terraces are cut at precise parabolic angles, designed to catch the ambient tectonic and atmospheric noise of their tidally locked world and channel it downward, focusing it into the central subterranean chamber. The terraformed canyon walls surrounding the site acted as a colossal feedback loop. By analyzing the concentric flaking of the surrounding cliff faces, we see that the geography itself was carved to bounce the ziggurat's emitted frequencies back upon the structure, endlessly compounding the amplitude. Religion and industry were indistinguishable. To assemble the stone was to pray. The acoustic masonry doctrine dictated that the universe was not made of static matter, but of vibrating ether, and to control the frequency was to control the divine. The society believed that if they could perfectly align the resonant frequency of their entire capital to the natural harmonic of their world, they would achieve a state of permanent, frictionless grace. They sought to tune their civilization like an instrument. Consequently, if the entire city resonated at a specific, mandated frequency, then social dissent or rebellion could be categorized as literal acoustic dissonance. An off-key thought, a non-compliant architecture, or an unsanctioned spoken word would physically grate against the enforced harmonic of the state. To step out of tune in the shadow of the Echo-Ziggurat was not merely illegal, it invited catastrophic molecular failure. They were a society perfectly bound by the deafening sound of their own absolute dogma. The ultimate tragedy of the Echo-Ziggurat is not found in the slow decay of its architecture, but in the terrifying, instantaneous violence of its end. When we examine the broader geological footprint of the civilization's capital, we do not find the typical markers of societal collapse. There are no ash layers from prolonged siege warfare, no famine pits, and no gradual erosion of the urban centers. Instead, the archaeological record simply shatters. The fatal flaw of a society built entirely upon absolute acoustic harmony is that it completely lacks the capacity to absorb dissonance. During what our syntactical models translate as the Ascension Chord, a planetary-scale acoustic ritual intended to permanently sync the tectonic hum of their tidally locked world with the artificial frequency of the state, the architects made a mathematically catastrophic error. They failed to account for the amplification threshold of their own terraformed geography. When the millions of specialized acoustic masons and biomechanical resonance engines initiated the Great Chord, the sound waves were channeled down the parabolic terraces of the ziggurat and bounced against the shattered canyon walls. The geography acted exactly as designed, compounding the amplitude. However, instead of achieving a frictionless, divine stasis, they inadvertently triggered an earth-shattering positive feedback loop. It was the planetary equivalent of bringing a microphone too close to a speaker, amplified to the magnitude of billions of decibels. I find it deeply chilling to examine the particulate layer recovered from the outer edges of the canyon. The Echo-Ziggurat was not destroyed by an explosive shockwave.
The sheer, compounding violence of the resonant frequency simply exceeded the binding energy of solid matter. The acoustic feedback loop inverted the very anti-gravitational wave that held their society together. Within seconds, the atomic lattice of their magnificent basalt architecture violently vibrated itself apart. The stone did not crumble, it liquefied into an abrasive, hyper-fine dust. The biological inhabitants, completely saturated in this cascading sonic environment, would have experienced instantaneous cellular disassociation. Their bodies were simply deleted by the sound. The devastation radiated outward, fracturing the planetary crust in perfect, concentric waves of tectonic annihilation, forever locking the echo of their hubris into the geography of the dead world. Today, the canyon of the Echo-Ziggurat is profoundly, unnaturally silent. The catastrophic event effectively burned out the local etheric field, leaving an atmospheric dead zone where sound waves struggled to travel at all. The civilization sang a note so perfect and so loud that it permanently broke the sky's ability to carry a tune. As we initiate the acoustic dampeners and return this singular blob to the heavy silence of the archive, we must confront the terminal danger of seeking absolute harmony. They tuned their world to an uncompromising perfection, only to shatter it with a single, unbroken note. It forces us to ask, in our own relentless pursuit of frictionless, engineered order, are we merely finding the exact frequency required to tear ourselves apart?